At 2:17 a.m., inside a small interrogation room, a man finally broke his silence. For nearly 8 hours, detectives had questioned him about a crime that had shaken an entire community. A small camera recorded every moment as the fluorescent lights hummed overhead. Then the man leaned forward and spoke the words investigators had been waiting to hear. He confessed. He described the night of the crime and how it happened. For the detective sitting across from him, it felt like the investigation had finally reached its conclusion. After weeks of uncertainty, they believed they had found their answer. The case appeared solved. But 2 days later, everything changed. The same man who confessed now made a new statement. This time, he said the confession was not true. He insisted he had never committed the crime. According to him, the long hours of questioning had pushed him to say things investigators wanted to hear. Suddenly, the case that once seemed closed became far more complicated. Why would someone confess to a crime and then take it back? To understand what happened, investigators had to return to the beginning. The victim was 28-year-old Daniel Harper. Friends described him as quiet, thoughtful, and dependable. He worked as a technician at a small electronics repair shop and often helped neighbors fix broken devices. Daniel lived alone in a modest apartment not far from his workplace. His life was simple and routine. But on the evening of October 14th, that routine ended. Daniel stopped answering his phone. At first, no one thought much of it. But when he failed to appear at work the next morning, concern began to grow. A co-worker eventually drove to his apartment to check on him. Daniel's car was still parked outside. When the door was finally opened, the discovery inside confirmed the worst. Daniel Harper had been killed sometime during the night. The crime shocked the community. Violent incidents were rare in the area, and investigators initially had very few leads. However, a neighbor soon provided an important detail. The neighbor had seen a man enter Daniel's apartment building shortly after 9 o'clock that evening and leave about an hour later. Detectives eventually identified that visitor. His name was Marcus Reed. Marcus was not a stranger. He and Daniel had attended the same technical training program years earlier and occasionally stayed in contact. Phone records confirmed they had spoken several times during the week leading up to the crime. When investigators first questioned Marcus, he admitted visiting Daniel that evening. However, he insisted the meeting had been friendly and brief. According to Marcus, they talked for a while, had a drink, and then he left. He said Daniel was alive when he walked out. But investigators soon discovered inconsistencies in his story. Marcus claimed he left shortly after 9:30 p.m., yet cell phone records suggest his phone remained near the apartment much later. Because of these discrepancies, detectives asked Marcus to return for further questioning. The second interview lasted for hours. Investigators carefully walked through the timeline and challenged parts of his account. As the night continued, Marcus appeared increasingly tired. Then, late into the interrogation, his story changed. Marcus leaned forward and admitted responsibility. According to his confession, the visit had turned into an argument. Tensions escalated, and the situation spiraled out of control. Marcus described what he claimed had happened and explained that he panicked afterward. The confession included details investigators believed only someone inside the apartment could know. Within hours, Marcus Reed was arrested. News of the confession spread quickly. Many believed the case had finally reached its conclusion. But only 2 days later, Marcus withdrew his confession. With an attorney present, he stated that the admission was false. He claimed the long interrogation had left him exhausted and overwhelmed. According to Marcus, investigators repeatedly suggested what might have happened until he eventually agreed with their version of events. Now the investigation faced a serious problem. Confessions can be powerful evidence, but they are not always reliable. Detectives needed to determine whether Marcus had told the truth during the interrogation or whether he had simply repeated what investigators believed. Forensic evidence from the apartment confirmed Marcus had been there that night, but it did not directly link him to the crime itself. The timeline remained uncertain, and witness accounts were limited. As legal experts reviewed the interrogation footage, the debate grew. Some believed Marcus's confession sounded genuine. Others argued that the details could have emerged during hours of questioning. Months later, investigators discovered something unexpected while reviewing surveillance footage from a nearby street. A vehicle passed through an intersection close to Daniel's apartment around the time of the crime. The car did not belong to Marcus. It belonged to a man named Evan Cole, someone who had once worked with Daniel years earlier. Phone records also showed Evan had attempted to contact Daniel several times during the week before the incident. When questioned, Evan said he had simply driven to the area that night. But investigators soon noticed inconsistencies in his explanation. The discovery raised a troubling possibility. Had Marcus's confession led investigators away from another potential lead? Prosecutors eventually faced a difficult decision. Without the confession, the evidence against Marcus Reed was far less certain. Defense attorneys argued the confession had been unreliable from beginning, while prosecutors insisted it contained meaningful details. For Daniel Harper's family, the case remained a painful search for answers. What began as a seemingly clear confession had evolved into a complicated mystery. The story became a powerful example discussed by investigators and legal experts studying the psychology of confessions. Because sometimes a confession appears to end a mystery, but in rare and troubling cases, it only raises a deeper question. When someone admits to a crime, how can we truly know whether a confession reveals the truth, or simply the story someone felt forced to tell?